This video is on adding, subtracting fractions, both with like denominators and unlike denominators. Let's start with like denominators. What do I mean by like denominators? Well, let's look at the fractions 2/3 and 1/3. These are two fractions. The numerator of the first one is 2. The denominator of the first one is 3. The second fraction, the numerator is 1, and the denominator is also 3. So these have what I would call like denominators, meaning they have the same number in the bottom of the fraction or in the denominator. So if I were adding these, what I would do is add just across the top. 2 plus 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. I would leave the bottom the same. You don't add the bottom, you just keep it 3. So 2/3 plus 1/3 is 3/3, and then we can simplify. That simplifies to 1. If we look at 4/5 plus 2/5, again, 4 numerator, 5 denominator, 2 numerator, 5 denominator. They have a like denominator of 5. So we just add across the top 2 plus 4, which is 6/5. Now we're subtracting fractions with like denominators. Let's start with our same still fractions, 2/3 minus 1/3. Notice again, they both have 3 in the denominator. That's what we mean by like denominators. So now how do we subtract them? Well, just like with addition, all we have to do is worry about the top. So I could actually rewrite this as 2 minus 1 over 3. The denominator stays the same. 3 stays the same straight across. The top, we just do the subtraction, 2 minus 1. So 2 minus 1 is 1, leaving us with 1/3 as our answer. So 2/3 minus 1/3 is 1/3. A common mistake is to also add or subtract the denominators. You do not want to do that. The denominators, when you're adding and subtracting, stay the same. This is different from multiplying and dividing. Okay, with addition and subtraction, they stay the same. Now we're talking about adding fractions with unlike denominators, meaning they're going to have different numbers in the denominator. So let's take a look at 2. Here's 1/3 plus 3/4. You'll notice they do not have the same number in the denominator. 1/3 has 3 in the denominator, 3/4 has 4 in the denominator. These are unlike denominators. The only way to add them is to make them into fractions with like denominators. And the way that we're going to do that is look for the least common multiple of the denominators, or the least common denominator, or LCD. So the least common denominator, or LCD, of 3 and 4, well, we have to find a multiple that they have in common. One of the ways of doing that is simply listing the multiples. 3, 6, 9, 12. Those are the multiples of 3, 4, 8, 12, until you get to one that they have in common. In this case, they share 12. So we can use that as our common denominator. So we want to start by renaming our fraction in terms of twelfths, meaning we're going to change 1/3 into some number of twelfths and 3/4 into some number of twelfths. What we want to think about is what multiplication takes place from us to go to 3 to 12. Well, we have to multiply by 4. So we're going to do the same thing to the numerator. 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/3 is 4/12. We do the same thing for the second fraction. What multiplication did it take to go from 4 to 12? Well, we multiplied by 3. So we're going to do the same thing to the top. 3 times 3 is 9. So now we have 4/12 and 9/12. We can add these together. 4/12 plus 9/12 equals 13/12. So 1/3 plus 3/4 is 13/12. And there's no simplification we need to do there. Here we have two fractions with unlike denominators, and we're going to do subtraction. Now, you might notice that they have like numerators, meaning they both have 5 in the numerator. But that actually doesn't help us in any way. So it's just there to confuse us maybe, or throw us off track, but it doesn't actually help us move forward. We still need like denominators. So we want to look at 2 and 21, and we want to see, okay, what are multiples they share in common? I'm going to start with 7. 7 and 21. I'm going to start with 7. 7, 14, 21. 21, and 21 obviously shares 21 as a multiple, so those are the multiples we want to work with. So we want to rename both of these fractions in terms of 21sts. Now the second one's easy. We already know what it is in terms of 21sts. It's 5 21sts. But what about this first one? Well, what did we do to get 7 into 21? Meaning, what did we multiply by? We multiplied by 3. So we have to do the same thing to the top. Times 3 gives us 15 21sts. So when we rename these things, we end up with 5 21sts and 15 21sts, or 15 21sts minus 5 21sts, as it were. When we do that subtraction, we end up with 10 21sts, and there's no simplification available. So in review, adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators is very simple. We just add and subtract the numerator. Adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators requires that extra step of us finding a like denominator, or an LCD.